so very much for contributing her time and effort to this project. It's really a labor of love, and thank you very much. We've been doing this now for just about November. In November, 3 years ago was when we started. So we've done 3 full years of these, and we go dark twice a year for the fourth Tuesdays of November and December because of Thanksgiving and Christmas. Other than that, we're on twice a month. I'd like to, before I introduce Lady Elsa, I want to ask if anybody has any announcement that they'd like to make or anything that they'd like to share with the rest of the group. We've got about 15 seconds to speak up, otherwise we'll move on. Okay, well, moving right along. I'm going to lean forward so I can read from my other computer screen and introduce Lady Elsa. She's a femme leatherdyke with a passion for kink education. She is very proud to have served as half of the very first international power exchange couple in 2012 and has traveled all over the country talking and teaching about non-traditional power exchange and BDSM BDSM spirituality and encouraging healthy power exchange relationships. In her local Indianapolis community, she's the leader and co-founder of Andromeda, a BDSM social and educational group for kinky women. And she has held many leadership positions in NLA Indianapolis. And by the way, Lady Elsa, I started in NLA Austin, and but it was sort of in its dying throes, and it only lasted about 3 more years. But I was on their board for a couple of those 3 years. Lady Elsa's current crusade is to help improve the quality of BDSM education by conducting Train the Trainer intensives for current and aspiring local and regional presenters throughout the U.S. Some of her favorite things include clothespin play, pressure points, butches in business attire, and endorphins. And with that, I'm going to mute my mic, and Ava is going to turn the presenter capability over to Lady Elsa, and she has a PowerPoint presentation that she's then going to manage. So you won't be seeing me again until the very end. Lady Elsa, if you could sort of keep it to about 60 minutes, about an hour and 10 minutes, I'd appreciate it. And other than that, it's over to you. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you, Bob. It's a pleasure to be with everybody tonight. This is my very first time presenting in this medium, so we'll see how it goes. I'm going to click over to my PowerPoint presentation here. This is me. That's an older picture of me there. As my bio said, I've been in the kink community educating since about 2008. Traveled a lot during my title year with boy Chris. And I saw a lot of presentations, a lot of good ones and a lot of really bad ones. My job, I write educational materials for a living and teach classes. And I'll be teaching this class in person at Leather Leadership Conference coming up in Atlanta in 2016. To give credit where credit is due, I have to tell you that most of the materials today come from the work of Sharon Bowman, and the last slide of the presentation will contain an extensive bibliography of all her books. Let's see how this interface works here. Okay, there's my next slide. Good. So I want to start out by opening up a little discussion. Think about the questions here. What's great about good classes and what do you hate about bad ones? And think about some of the best and worst classes that you have ever attended and tell us about what made it so good or so bad. So anybody feel free to jump right in here. I see Tanvir has hand up.
Some of the best classes I've ever attended have been the ones that were interactive, the ones that ask us questions, not just questions, but ask us to participate in some way. One of the worst classes I've ever attended was someone who spoke in a monotone, and it was like they were just reading from a book. They barely looked at us, and it was horrible.
Mm-hmm. I can identify very strongly with both of those. Dr. Bob, yes.
Yes, thank you. My experience, I'm out at conferences about once every 3 or 4 weeks and have been since 2007. So I've sat through a lot of presentations. And my experience is that when somebody is telling their personal story, it's sort of a dead loss. Unless they have learned to extrapolate some of the lessons they've learned and generalize from what they have learned, their individual story is just their individual story.
I can really relate to that. I tell people there are about 5 people in the whole kink community that can keep my attention for an hour while they sit and talk about their lives. And you're not you, not you in particular, but you in general to the audience, I say, and you're probably not one of them. Unless you're Master Skip or Master C. Sampson, probably not. Who else wants to tell us about a good or a bad class? Slave Mikey.
Well, I like to hear people that really believe in whatever it is they're teaching and they're speaking from their heart as opposed to reading it off of slides or whatever. But those people that can really, as Dr. Bob was saying, can relate it to things that have happened to them personally, but then can take that and say, here's kind of what I've gathered from that. And you know, this ability to speak from the heart when you talk about a Master Skip or some of those other great presenters that we have in the community, you will always feel that like they are teaching from their heart. And those who don't do well, and believe me, I've been to a lot more classes I'm not real thrilled with in the community than ones I am thrilled with. It's monotone, it's talking off of slides, it's reading off of papers sometimes, and it's just to get through the class.
Yeah, absolutely. You feel like they're just soldiering through it. Tandir, you had your hand up again? Still muted.
I think she left that up from the last time, and I had texted her privately that she had it up, but she hasn't responded yet, so she may not be sitting right there.
All right. So next I want to talk about some of the myths of learning. People think that you learn from lectures, and they think this because that's the educational system that our kids grow up in, that the teacher stands in the front of the class, the sage on the stage. And there's a lot of big personalities, as we know, out there in the presenter world, the people who want to be the sage on the stage. But my experience and educational theory backs me up on this is that they're often not the best presenters. Another myth is that being serious makes for good learning. You look at our college, our educational system again, we're all serious. But some of the best classes that you can attend are fun. They laugh. You have a good time. And another thing that I think people believe about learning is that when people are quiet and listening to you respectfully, that they're somehow worshiping the information that you're providing, and that a quiet room means that they're paying attention. But my experience is a quiet room means people are asleep. Slave Mikey, do you have your hand up? Yep.
If I did, I didn't mean to.
Oh, that's okay. Please jump in, anybody, at any time. I'm used to doing this class where there's lots of audience interaction, so please interrupt me. So the reality of learning, people learn in a lot of different ways. And that's what the bulk of today is going to be about, is talking about those different ways that people learn. My experience is the ideal teacher is the guide on the side rather than the sage on the stage. The guide on the side is focusing on the material to be learned and not their own personality. The best classes for me are when they have fun, when you laugh, when you jump around and raise your hand and wave your arms. And the noisy room means people are engaging with your material. Don't be afraid of the noisy room. Don't be afraid of people talking amongst themselves. That means that they actually care about what you're talking about. So there's 6 ways that people learn things. You can listen and talk, do and watch, you can read, and you can take notes. Now think about the last Kink presentation that you went to. How many of these did the speaker use? When I train new presenters, I tell them you have to use a minimum of 3 of these. But a lot of presenters will just get up there and talk, or so the audience is just listening to others speak. And this is where I think our presentations fall down in a lot of our Kink education, in our event presentations. So taking a look at those lists, pick out the 3 that you think are the most effective. And somebody raise their hand and tell me which ones you think those are. Nobody. Dr. Bob, yes.
I would say, I suppose, doing, experimenting, and practicing.
Doing,
Anything?
I was counting that as 1.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 1, definitely. What are 2 more? The other 2 on that list that are the most effective?
Well, I presume that if you're taking notes, that you're absorbing the information and then putting it down in your own language. So there's a processing method involved there. And talking and discussing obviously involves an interaction and therefore would be valuable.
Right. All right. Let's see how Dr. Bob did. Perfect score. Yes. Active methods are the better ones. Talking trumps listening. Studies have shown that when people talk, they retain a lot more than when they just listen. If you get up and do it, it trumps watching it. And writing trumps reading. And the way that I use these in a Kink classroom is the first thing I do is I ask people to talk. And when I teach this class in a classroom, I try to make this class as much of a proof of concept of what I'm teaching today as possible. So the first thing I did was on our second slide that we did in this class, I asked you to come up with what were the good and bad presentations. So I had you talk. Doing trumps watching. This is especially true in a skills-based class. Having somebody throw a bullwhip, much better than having somebody watch you throw a bullwhip. Writing trumps reading. When I teach this class in an in-person session, I'll give the students a handout that says that has blanks, and they'll say blank trumps blank, blank trumps blank. And I make them fill in those to make their own handout because they remember them better because writing trumps reading. Now, brain science to why this actually works. There's this secretary in your brain. Now, if you've ever zoned out when you're driving, you know that your brain can just go on autopilot. And that's the secretary. The secretary keeps things running when nothing is special is happening. But the secretary's other job is to wake you up when something happens that's different. So if your audience is just staring blankly at you, their secretaries have probably kicked in and you probably lost them. So to wake people up in your classes, you have to do 2 things. One is to mix things up, and the other is to get them to participate. So going back here, participate, 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 talking, doing, and writing. Now, why do we talk about learning styles? Well, one thing is that you have a preferred learning style, whether you realize it or not, and it affects the way that you present. And most teachers tend to overuse the techniques that they think everybody should like because it's what they like. So by learning about the different learning styles that people have and realizing that yours is only one, you can overcompensate or compensate for what you're doing to people, subjecting them to your learning style as you teach. Now, credit where credit is due. The learning styles that I cover in this class, there are 4 of them, and Bernice McCarthy came up with these, and then Sharon Bowman in her work publicized them. So I didn't come up with these, I just believe in them. Any questions so far? How are we doing? Y'all good?
Lady Elsa?
Yes.
Sir Dragon here. I think it's interesting that even though we say that doing, talking, and writing are the three best ways of doing things, we need to also look at ourselves and go, but are those the ways I learn? I know, for example, Dr. Bob, you know, he writes a lot. That's his thing, and that's what he does, and that's how he's able to process. For me, it's more about doing, talking, interacting with the presenters. Because if I start to write things down, I'm now not focusing on what they're saying, and then I'm not usually able to keep up with what they're saying, so I'll get behind. So what I've found is I put the notebooks away, and I interact by talking and asking questions and interacting more with the presenter, because for me, that audio, taking in the audio of learning, that's how I learn the best. Because, for example, I read out loud to myself when I'm reading, because that extra bit of sound, that hearing it, is how I learn. So it's important to understand how you learn as a person. Just because something seems to be the right way doesn't always mean it's right for you.
Exactly, yes. If you were to teach a class and you were to have everybody try to learn it by talking, people who like to write, like Dr. Bob, would have a problem with that. So absolutely, we have to target all the different learning styles as we present.
Actually, let me make a point on that as well. Whenever I start a relationship with somebody, I put them through a processing modalities test so that I can determine the extent to which they are auditory, visual, kinesthetic, or olfactory in terms of taking in and processing information. So in fact, I have what is pretty much a learning disability. I'm virtually non-auditory. You can speak to me till the cows come home, but unless I've made a note of it, it didn't exist in my life. So that was what Sir Dragon Z was commenting about. I sit in classes at conferences with a computer in my lap. And in some cases, such as going through Butchman's, I had to have, we had to negotiate that the class itself would permit me to take contemporaneous notes, because otherwise, as fortunately the instructors at Butchman's knew, I've always done this, and I wouldn't be able to retain anything unless I filter it through and type it out or write it out. I'll stop now.
Well, that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that with us. Multi-Perv, you had your hand up?
Yes, I was just going to add on to the person before Dr. Bob. I actually like writing and taking notes, but there is a point where if I've just got a blank page, then it gets rather frustrating. I get behind, and I kind of am not listening as much because I'm busy trying to keep up. So I kind of like when there's handouts that at least have a starting point, some of the major points, and then I can take some notes to fill in the blanks or things that particularly resonate with me. So it's kind of a balance between the two extremes.
One of the co-presenters that I sometimes teach with, Talina Czar, does handouts where she has blanks in her handouts where words are missing to prompt people to fill in the words as she goes along. And I always thought that was a great idea. Right. Much better than that intimidating blank page.
Indeed.
Okay, any other comments for now, or shall we go on? Okay. So we're going to do an exercise now. I'm going to read you a scenario, and I want you to think to yourself which of these 4 reactions to the scenario resonates with you most. We're starting the process now of helping you figure out which of the 4 learning styles is yours. So go inside your head and see how you would take on this new situation. You're really excited because the UPS truck has just delivered a large carton containing a special present from your best friend. You drag the carton into the house and cut away the cardboard with a knife. You step back and you stare at about 30 pieces of black steel in various shapes and sizes. You realize that after you assemble the pieces, you will have a new exercise machine, one that you've been wanting for months, and you can't wait to get started on your dream body. As you listen to the following 4 choices, choose the number that best describes what you think you would think and do. Number 1. At first you feel a little overwhelmed. How in the world am I going to do this, you wonder? You decide to put it off until tomorrow, when your friend who sent you the gift will be visiting. And then you can thank your friend in person and ask for help assembling it. It makes you feel better to know that it will be a collaborative project and your friend can participate in the experience with you. After having decided that, your anxiety eases and you move the box out of the way for now. Your motto is, together we can do it. Number 2, you're pretty sure you can put it together once you have all the information. So the first thing you do is read the instructions. You even reread certain sections to make sure you understand. Then you begin to sort the pieces out, organizing them neatly on the floor and referring to the instructions as you go. You patiently proceed step by step, constructing the machine with the instructions as your guide. Your motto is, with enough information, I can do anything. Number 3, you've put together so many things in the past that you feel that this exercise machine is pretty simple. Relying on your past experience and common sense, you begin to move pieces around, fitting together as you go. Oh, you might look at the instructions on occasion for a bit of clarification, but you're comfortable doing this without much input from the instructions or from your friends and family. Common sense is your guide. Your motto is, do what works. Number 4, at first you're irritated because you hate putting things together step by step. First, you try to delegate the job to someone else. You call your friend on the phone. Hey friend, can you come over and assemble this? I'll order pizza and we'll make a fun night of it. Unfortunately, your friend is busy, so you resort to plan B and you try to do it yourself. You dump out the box contents on the floor and browse through the instructions, but they are too technical to understand. So you look at the picture on the box and you begin to construct the machine as best you can. When you are finished, and you notice 2 or 3 steel pieces still lying on the floor, you shrug and think, oh well, close enough, it'll do. I can use this. Your motto is, let's try and see what happens. So anybody have one of those styles that strongly resonates with them right away?
Sure, I'll go first, Sir Dragon Z.
Okay.
I'll say 90% 2, 5% 3, and 5% 4.
Okay. So 90% 2, you said?
Yes.
Okay. It's very common for a person to be in more than one style. Usually there's a primary style and 1 or 2 secondaries. Anybody else want to share theirs?
Yes, Jen, my master says that she's number 3. And I sort of do it like this. I either can figure it out through some of the directions or on my own, or I hire an expert.
So which one do you think you are then, Dr. Bob?
Well, once again, if it's not, I have Asperger's syndrome, so I get reactive, but I can, if I can pretty well construct it based on my experience and the directions, I'll go with it. Otherwise, I'll hire somebody to come in and put it together for me.
Okay.
So Master says I'm a 3.
Okay, a 3. Anybody else want to share theirs? All right, let's see if we can refine that. Here's another little clarification. Which one of these helps you relax when you're stressed? Is it a quiet evening connecting with your loved ones? A quiet evening with a book and no interruptions? Organizing your closets and catching up on the chores? Or going out to a club and meeting new people? These correspond with those same 1, 2, 3, and 4 from before. So a little bit more information. And I've got one more. Slave Mikey says he's a 1.
Sir Dragon Z is a 3.
Okay.
Master and I are both 3s.
3s.
I'm a 2. Multi-per.
Okay. All right, let's try one more. How do you prefer to learn about a new BDSM tool or toy? Number 1, do you listen and share experiences until you decide you understand what it's about and how it would fit into your play? Do you read a well-written website or book about it, studying diligently until you know every feature and technique? Do you get one and use it on your own, practicing diligently until you master it? Or do you get one and play around with it with your friends, trying it out, laughing and talking until you get bored and wander off?
This is Tangier. I'm a mix between a 1 and a 3.
1 and a 3. Okay.
Yeah, I missed the first part because I was gone.
Oh, well, that's okay. There's more to be had here, so you haven't missed anything that you can't catch up on.
Okay.
Sir Dragon Z is a 3.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Dr. Bob here, depends on whether you're talking about a flogger or fire play or electrostim or clothespins. So if it's fairly simple, I'll watch it demonstrated a few times, maybe take a workshop on it and then try it out cautiously. However, when they are complicated topics, fisting, electrostim, fire play and such, I may take 4 or 5 workshops on it and then find somebody to mentor me before I actually do it on someone.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else want to chime in there? Okay. So, learning style 1. We're still refining our learning styles. The next 4 slides are going to tell you a little bit more about each style. The learning style 1 is the peacemaker because learning style 1 people really like people. They're kind of calm, quiet, slow-paced. They're the Zen people. They like everybody to get along. They like harmony. They check in with feelings. They listen to other people before making their own point. They process their feelings rather than the data. And in order to learn, the learning style 1 people need to make a personal connection with other people in the class and or with the instructor. Learning style true, we call them the truth keepers. The truth keepers love straightforward lists like this one. And this last slide, each of these slides I've designed to be appealing to the person with that learning style. The first one, the peacemaker, thinks in thought bubbles all over the place. Our number 2 here, our truth keeper, likes things in a nice linear, orderly fashion. They like to focus on one thing at a time. They like the documentation and the details. Excuse me. If there's any number 2s in the class, they're probably looking forward to the bibliography at the end of the presentation. They like to think things through, and they process information intellectually rather than emotionally. They like the lecture. They probably did extremely well in traditional classrooms in school. They like documented evidence. They don't take much stock in subjective judgments, hunches, feelings. If it's logical and it fits what they know, that's for them. One thing about educators who are learning style 2 is they tend to overuse handouts and visual aids. I tend to be a 2-3 mix myself, so I have a lot of handouts, a lot of slides in this presentation. Our number 3s. Number 3s are the business executive type. They like making decisions. They like practical hands-on things. They like results. They're matter-of-fact, bottom-line people. They don't need a lot of help. They can just jump in there and get things done. If you have a project and you need it done, and you need it done quick, you ask a 3. They like hands-on. They love going to demo classes where they can get up and try things. Number 3 will value things according to their practical value. Our number fours love all this high energy color and splash and excitement. Our number fours often don't do well in our traditional education system because they learn by talking and moving. And talking and moving is not all of that popular in the modern classroom. They socialize easily. They learn best when they're learning with high energy people. They like looking at things in many different ways, taking risks. They try things out to see what happens without a lot of caution. They like shifting back and forth and newness and big possibilities. They'll try anything pretty much. Number four can be extremely charismatic presenters. These are stage people. These are people who love the spotlight, but not for a selfish reason. They just genuinely love people and love interacting. So now that we've been through the four styles, time to make the definitive proclamation of what you think your style is. So go through and try to pick either a primary style and at least one secondary, or two co-primary styles if you can't decide. And let us know which one you think you are.
Sir Dragon Z, 4 with 20% for both 2 and 3. So like 60% 4. I'm very active and energetic, definitely. But I do have aspects of 2 and 3, definitely, that I'm very analytical about checking things out first, though, too.
One thing I forgot to say about 3s is that 3s are chameleons. A 3 can imitate any other style if they think that it's necessary to get the job done. And they can do a pretty convincing job of imitating any of the other styles. That's why 3s are very results focused. And so just because you can do one of the other styles, if you're only doing it because you want to get the job done, you're probably a 3. Who else wants this? Oh, please go ahead.
This is Ken Deere. Yeah, I'm a 1 and a 3, mostly a 3.
Slave Mikey? I see a hand up, but I think his microphone's still muted.
How's that?
Ah, there you are.
Oh, yeah, too much technology here. Somewhere between a 1 and a 4. I would probably say it's probably kind of an even between the two.
So you must be a very people-oriented person. Our 1s and our 4s are people, and our 3s and our 2s are data.
Right.
Master says she is a 2. 100% 2. I'm probably 80% 3 and 20% 4. But a lot of what you said about imitation is applicable.
Well, I am pretty solidly a 2-3. I love the information, I love the handouts, I love the data, but I'm also enough of an executive type that if I have to go out of my way and be social and outgoing, I can do it. One thing that's interesting is 1s and 3s are opposed and 2s and 4s are opposed. And by opposed, I don't mean they're antagonistic toward each other. I just mean they're very different from one another. The 1s and 4s, as I said, are people. The 2s and 3s are data. The 3s and 4s are big picture. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, the 3s and 4s are big picture. The 1s and 2s are details. So when you cross those, the 1s sometimes have a hard time understanding the 3s, and the 2s sometimes have a hard time understanding the 4s. Like if somebody is a strong 4, they're going to think, oh, those 2s, they're just boring. They're just tedious. They care too much about the details. And the 2s are going to think about the 4s, oh, he's just a party animal. He has no substance. And kind of the opposite with the 1s and 3s. The 1s, being very people-oriented, very quiet and kind and gentle people, are going to think those 3s are just mercenaries out to succeed at any cost. And the 3s are going to think of the 1s, oh, he's just wishy-washy, he'll never amount to anything. So you're coming into your classroom with your personal style, but then you've also got people of all these different learning styles sitting in the seats waiting expectantly for you to target them with your learning. So what do we do? How you teach. If you're a 1, you tend to go, your go-to thing for teaching tends to be activities to get people to get to know each other, and you tend to move at a pretty slow pace. A number 1 may run out of time before the end of their class because it's really important to a number 1 that everybody in the class be heard and understood. A number 2 loves the facts, the note-taking, the lectures. A number 2 can tend to overload people with data, but you never leave a number 2's class thinking that you didn't learn anything. 3s love the hands-on, the real life. They move pretty briskly through their class. Number 4s are the personality people. They use their energy and enthusiasm to engage the students. If you have a great time in a number 4's class, it's probably because you enjoyed hearing them speak so much. So our style-based pitfalls are number 1s. Number 1s, sometimes you can be slow and wishy-washy, and a heckler or a strong personality in your class can derail your whole presentation. And we've all sat in classes where we felt really sorry for the poor presenter because some overly aggressive student went after them. A lot of times that's a style number 1 presenter. Our style 2s, they tend to feed people information with a fire hose. They can be rigid and they can keep tight control of the class, and it can be kind of boring. Number 3s, sometimes people find you a little pushy and opinionated, and they think that you move through the material too quickly. Because number 3s are so quick and bright that they think everybody wants to move that quickly. If you're a number 3, you may be thinking this class is moving a little too slow for you. Our number 4s, flighty, scattered, and ineffective. Especially the 2s are going to think that about you. The other 3s and 4s are going to be delighted by you because you're quite an entertainer. But these pitfalls are the things that you need to watch out for to avoid being that bad presenter that people talk about at the break. So, how do we adjust our style? If you're a 1, your biggest problem is the time limit. You're probably going to run out of time because you want everybody to be heard. So you try to be more quick and more assertive. If you're a 2, you're probably thinking, how do I get through all this material in the time I've been given? So you're trying to move briskly through that material. And you've got to give the students time to share their opinions and their knowledge. You need to make it clear that they can raise their hand and talk. Their feelings and their experiences matter too, and not just the facts that you're going through. 3s, people tend to think that you're a steamroller. You need to allow the students time to think and speak and not rush them right through into what you know is the right answer. Sharon Bowman gives it the 3 before me rule, she calls it. Before you give your opinion, you need to get 3 students to talk about their opinions. The 4s, stick to your time limit. Since 4s are not detail-oriented people, they often get way off topic. And some extremely charismatic presenters can get away with it. Most can't. So don't let all that excitement that you bring to the table derail your agenda. So let's take a minute and think about your personal style. And does anybody want to share how your personal style has worked or not worked for you in the classroom? I'll give you a minute to think about it. What good or bad things do people say about you after your classes that you teach? Mikey?
Well, in looking at this stuff, one of the things I've realized is that there's been a big shift in the way, because when I was a Marine and I was teaching total quality and leadership, some of the leadership subjects, I was more of a 2 and 3 than I am a 1 and a 4. So there's been a big shift, and I look at it as going from being left brain to right brain kind of thing. But some of the things that have worked very well for me is that I connect with people, and so sometimes when I focus too much on facts, I lose some of the. I understand the importance of hard data and all that kind of stuff, being a statistics guy in my earlier life, but nowadays it's more about connecting with people, and I find that it works very well. It is challenging when I get the intellectual types in there who want to intellectualize everything. So this material really makes sense to me. I appreciate it.
Oh, good. I'm glad that it's helpful. That's really interesting that you have shifted so much over your life from one style to another.
Yeah, I think it just goes along with my general way of being has obviously shifted from what I had to do as a Marine to get things done and the way I do things now. So it's pretty interesting to look at all this in perspective too, because I've done a lot of teaching in my time, but to look at this, it's really interesting, and I really do appreciate this class.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you. Does anybody else want to share their experiences with teaching?
Well, I'm probably closer to a 4. I generally have about 4 hours worth of material prepared for a 90-minute session. I never have the intention of completing it. So and what I tell people in the beginning is that if they don't ask questions, I threaten to read the whole bloody document. So I really force them into interacting. And then I also tell them in the beginning that their questions are questions that others would ask also, so please speak up. And I will limit the amount of time that I'll give a section, even though I don't really ever intend to get through all of the sections. I'm not sure that covers it, but as close as I can, as close to the options you have here, be a number 4.
Okay. That really surprises me, Dr. Bob, because I have a lot of Ashby traits myself, and I had always associated me being a 2-3 with being Ashby, and it's really interesting to talk to another Ashby who's not a 2-3 at all.
Yeah, the problem, the challenge I'm having with this is that my classes are pretty cerebral. They're either theory classes or they're demos. And the theory classes, the challenge with them is that there's a lot of material to get through. And the people aren't, although I will get to certain points and ask for people's opinions, they're not necessarily in there to voice their own opinions. They're in there to hear a sort of an encyclopedic review of a field. But I think I should stop talking and let you get on with it. Yes, Master?
When I present, when I teach, I make sure that I move. I make sure that I change. There's a lot of inflection in my voice. There's a lot of animation in my movement. I write things on whatever paper that they give us so that I'm, really trying to accommodate everybody's learning style. I have handouts. I'm I move around the room instead of just in one place. So I didn't feel as though my teaching style fit into one of the 4 choices, because I feel as though while my learning style is different, because my learning style is very different from my teaching style.
Mm-hmm. It sounds to me like you have successfully come up with strategies that compensate for your learning style already. So what we're trying to teach people to do in this class, it sounds like you're already doing pretty successfully.
I'd also add that as I'm listening to you, I'm just fascinated with the idea of taking all this kind of material and applying it to relationship and communication problems. That going beyond a formal teaching setting, that these differences between people form the they either aid or detract from the communication process. We'd better
that sounds really interesting. I would love to see what you do with that.
Okay, we can take that off of here and work together on that.
Sure, love that. All right, so our next topic is, what do the students want? Your Style 1 students wants to please you, and they want to please the other people in the class. They want to make other people comfortable. They want to create interpersonal connections in the class. Your Style 2 people want a good grade and the right answer. Your Style 3 basically wants you to get out of their way. They want to learn hands-on, and they don't want a lot of interference. They want you to pick up the pace and get to the part that's practical that they can use. Our 4s, they want to have fun. They want to have the big picture. They want the big fluffy clouds of meaning. Don't bother them with the details. Let's talk about what it really means and how we can have fun with it, how we can use it to bring more joy in the world. So you have these 4 types of students that are all sitting in your class. How are we going to please them all? How are we going to do something in every class that's going to make each of them feel like, yeah, that was a good class? And the way we do that is we have a specific segment of the class that's specifically targeted to each of those people. And these are the 4 Ps. Our step 1, you start out the class by having students bond with one another. This places our number 1s. Then we do our presentation, which is we actually deliver the information. This places our number 2s, and you do it in a bunch of different multisensory ways. Remember the 6 ways that people got information: speaking and listening, watching and doing, reading and writing. So you try to target as many of those multisensory ways as you can to deliver that information. For step 3, you do your practice. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be hands-on skills practice. You can have projects, games, activities, quizzes, anything that gets people up and moving and has fun. And then our number 4s are targeted by step 4, where you actually use what you learn, you talk with one another about how you're going to apply the information, and you appreciate the experience that you just had in the class. So 4 steps for delivering a presentation targeted at each of the 4 learning styles. So how do we do this specifically? When you're planning a class, after you've got your topic in mind, you need to start asking yourself these questions for your individual plan. You need to think, how specifically am I going to connect with the students? Step 1. How am I going to present that information? What kind of practice activities could I do with this class? And how are we going to celebrate at the end? So the next 4 slides, I'm going to tell you some specific ways that you can do this. And I'm just going to give you a sampling of a few key ideas, but there are many more, hundreds of pages of more in the works of Sharon Bowman, which is the lady who all this information came from. And the bibliography, again, will be at the end. And I'm going to make the PowerPoints available for you to download if you would like them. So our step one ideas for connecting. Here's some things you can do. Group mingle, where you just have people stand up and walk around, and maybe you have people walk and mill around, and then you say stop. And whoever they're stopped closest to, they have to talk to. They have to say something about themselves, about why they're in the class. We could do take a stand. I do this one a lot in a class I do on sexuality and gender, to show how gender is a continuum, how sexual orientation is a continuum. I'll make one wall. I'll say, okay, if you really enjoy playing with men, go to this wall. If you really don't enjoy playing with men, you go to this wall. And then the people walk along that continuum between the two walls, and they look around and see who else may have that in common with them. And sometimes we'll do 4 or 5 different questions, 4 or 5 different continuums. This serves a couple purposes. One is it pleases the number ones because they find out something about other people and they get to share something about themselves. It does it very efficiently. You don't go around and have everybody say their name and why they're in the class, because that takes forever. But this is a very efficient way to get people to share. The other thing it does is, remember, movement. Oh, sorry, I had to take that part out. There's a couple of other trumps that I had to take out of this presentation for length, but one of them was movement trumps sitting. Anytime you can get somebody to move, it's better than letting them sit. Stand up and sit down. As an instructor, you could say, stand up if you believe X. Sit down if you believe Y. Same thing with raising the hands, except it's better because standing up makes them move more, and movement trumps sitting. You can ask people to share with a group, but if you have a big group of people, sometimes it's better to divide them up into groups and let them share with their little group, because that way everybody feels like they're heard, and yet the whole class doesn't hear every single person. Sitting at group tables is a good way to do this. And when I teach the full day version of this class, after you figure out what your learning style is, you sit with the other people of your style for the rest of the day. The theory there is that you can communicate better with somebody who shares your style. A gallery walk. Maybe you've seen this in class before. This is where you take a piece of poster board, or several pieces, and you tape them up around the wall. Then you write a question on each piece of poster board and let people come along with markers and answer the question. And then as an intro to the class, you can take some of the marker boards up front and read them to the class and say, this is what your fellow students are thinking. You can do the people hunt, the bingo, the scavenger hunt, one-legged interview. This is kind of fun. One of the problems with a lot of classes is when you ask people to share, you get that one person who wants to share for like 10 minutes. Well, with a one-legged interview, they can talk as long as they can stand on one leg. The leg goes down, the mouth goes shut. And you'd be surprised how well that keeps people's responses down to about 30 seconds to a minute. Birds of a feather flock together. What you can do here is say, take one person and say, okay, you're going to be the representative of X. Now, everybody who agrees with X or believes in X or feels a kindred with X, go stand near that person. And then you'll take another person over here. This person believes Y, and do the same thing and create little flocks of people that are kindred. As I said, these are just a few very basic general ideas. Sharon Bowman has hundreds of these for each step. Anybody want to take a break here and comment on any of these before we go on? Nope. Okay. Step 2, learning. Quizzes, Jeopardy boards are great. At the beginning of the class, you might want to see, what do you already know? So you have people whip out a pencil and paper and you ask them 5 questions. And maybe they know the answers, maybe they don't. And at the end of the class, you do another quiz and maybe ask them the same 5 questions or maybe similar ones. And that way they can see in writing how much they've learned in the class. Now, not everybody learns best by writing. Some people learn best by drawing. So you might encourage them to draw pictures instead of making notes. I've also seen a class where the instructor would put little things of Play-Doh on the tables and let people create sculptures. You can use metaphors, pop-ups. A pop-up is when maybe you're talking about something that's controversial or may have more than one interpretation. If somebody really agrees with you, you could ask them to stand up. Or if somebody has a question, you could ask people to stand up. And actually, having people stand up is a better way than having them raise their hand. Because let's say that you're in the middle of a thought and somebody raises their hand, and that poor person has got their hand up, and they're waving, and they're holding their arm up in the air, and they don't know if you've seen it, so they're waving and waving. But if you have people stand up, if they have a question, then they're more comfortable. They can comfortably stand there. And because it's so obvious that they're standing, there's no question that you've seen them. So you can then call on them at your leisure. Signal surveys. Did you see the movie where those guys were interviewing to be interns at Google, and they had those palettes, and you hold up like one side of the palette for yes and one side no? That's kind of the idea of a signal survey. You give people maybe a red and a green flag, and if they disagree with what you're saying, they hold up the red flag, and if they agree, they hold up the green flag. All efficient ways of getting people to participate in the learning phase so that all of that delivery of the information isn't so deadly dull and one-sided. Fill in the blanks while taking notes. As I said before, when I teach the trumps, I usually use blanks and let people fill in the blanks for that. And some personal reflection, although a lot of times there's not a lot of time for it. So if there's a phase that involves personal reflection, I'll usually put people into groups of 2 and 3 and say, turn to the person next to you and tell them how you feel about that, rather than telling the whole class about that. So let's go over ideas 1 and 2. Let's go back to ideas for step 1. Does anybody have a way that they use in their classroom to connect that has worked pretty well that we haven't talked about yet? Or if you have one for step 2, let's go ahead and throw that in there too right now. Okay, well, we'll let you think on those. And I'm going to go on to step 3, practicing. This is where we do our hands-on stuff. Now, if you've ever taught a skills class, you know that one of the problems is that you don't have time for everybody to practice. So that's where learning stations come in. Get some of your friends to come in who are pretty good with it and set up stations around the room where people can rotate through and try different skills. You can move a lot more people through the hands-on portion this way. You can do an each one, teach one, where you as the instructor demo the skill by teaching a couple people, or you have a couple ringers in the audience who maybe already know the skill. And then you have them teach 2 people, and then each one of them teaches 2 people, and then finally everyone in the room has had a chance to try it. And this one has the benefit of people learn better when they teach somebody else how to do it than just by doing it themselves. So each time a student teaches another student, they've learned an extra amount. You can have people review and critique each other's work. I do this when I teach the full day seminar of how to be a presenter. I have people spend 10 or 15 minutes working on their outline for their class, and then we do 10 or 15 minutes of peer review and critique. That way, as an instructor, I'm not responsible for going around and looking at everybody's stuff all the time. I'd just be bouncing around from table to table if I did that. You can do a round table review where maybe you make copies of something that everybody has done and pass it out, and everybody gives feedback at once to one person. Game boards, I talked about playing quizzes and games in step 2. In step 3, the students are actually coming up with the game boards to test each other. Skits and role play are great, especially for interpersonal classes. You can teach them and then evaluate and critique the way they've taught it. For example, let's say you're doing something with rope. You can have somebody teach the class their favorite tie, and then the rest of the class will critique what they learned. Say, well, it was hard for me to follow when you put your hand under there because I couldn't see what you were doing. And finally, for practicing, you can do a card swap where, you know, I'm completely blanking out on what a card swap is. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to skip that one and refer you to Sharon Bowman's stuff. All right, so we're going to go to step 4, celebrating at the end. A lot of instructors don't do this step, and it's a shame. They run out of room or they think, oh, that's not necessary. But celebrating the success of the class is a lot of what makes the students leave the class humming a little song, thinking how much they've learned. So this can really help your teacher evaluations and the perceived benefit that people think they got in your class by helping them summarize and celebrate what they've learned. One technique I use is called the koosh throw. You take a koosh ball, it's kind of like a talking stick, but you throw it with some force at one another so it's more fun. Whoever catches the koosh ball has to say something that they've learned or say something they're going to do differently because of the class. And this really makes people think about the benefit of what they've just learned from you. You can have them sculpt things out of Play-Doh or clay that shows what they've learned and then explain the sculpture to the class. A snowball fight is where you take little pieces of paper and everybody writes something that they have learned or benefited from the class. Then you wad up your piece of paper, you stand in a circle, and you throw your snowball as hard as you can at somebody else. Then you bend over and pick up a snowball, and you read what's on the snowball piece of paper to the class. This is good if you have a class with a lot of shy people who don't like to talk, because it's much easier to read somebody else's thoughts and feelings off of a piece of paper than it would be to share your own if you're kind of an introverted person. You can have people trade contact information, maybe business cards. As the instructor, you can have everybody write down their contact information and then you can email it to everybody. An inside-outside rotating circle is where you put half the people in the middle and half on the outside. And then people match up face-to-face, inside and outside. They share something and then the outside circle moves one person to the left or right. So you end up talking to half the people in the class in a pretty efficient way. You could do human machines, kind of like Rube Goldberg machines, where as a group you illustrate some concept or something that you've learned. Pats on the back, I love this one. This is where you give people sticky notes. They write nice things on the sticky notes and then they stick them on each other's backs. And it's not till the end of the class you retrieve all your sticky notes and see what people have said about it. Also works with paper bags, with lunch bags. You can put people's names on the bags and then have people drop their compliments into the bag. Talking stick, kind of like the koosh ball. The person who has the stick gets to talk. Action plan commitments. People can write down what they're going to do differently. Sometimes when you write things down or when you speak them out loud, they become more real. Foursquare feedback. If you've ever played Foursquare, you can bounce a ball between, you can bounce the ball between squares, and when the ball arrives at the person, they have to say something. So this takes the pressure off of people. If you've ever stood in a circle where it was awkward and nobody wanted to talk, the Foursquare feedback puts people in that position of it being okay for them to talk. So those are just a few ideas. As I said, many, many more out there, practical ways that you can incorporate all the 4 steps in your classes and target all 4 learning styles in one class. So let's do it. Let's celebrate. What's something you learned today that's going to be useful to you and that maybe you'll share with other people? Or what are you going to do differently in the future now when you present? So let's open up the floor and see what you have to say. And Dr. Bob, I'm going to let you take over the presenting at this point.
Okay. Well, I've been just fascinated with this. This has been extremely helpful, and I really appreciate it. Let me see. If you're giving this back over to me, that we're going to have, okay, so Ava's done that, and then I need to turn my camera back on. I bet that's going to be the secret of success.
Okay.
I wanted to just thank you. This has just been fascinating, and I think that it will be very helpful also for people to be able to have access to these to the slides. What you really caused me to think a lot about, though, is how to adapt some of these to my own presentations. I think mine are a little on the cerebral side, and I think they benefit a lot from reviewing some of your tips and techniques and working on incorporating them. So I really appreciate you sharing them with me. But a lot of this was, in fact, new material.
Great.
Anybody else want to chime in? Well, if you're a great presenter. If you have other material that you'd like to share, perhaps next spring, we're already booked up through February. But if you'd like to come on later in the year, you've been probably, I'd say, one of the top 5 best prepared presenters that we've had on here.
Oh, well, thank you.
And you know your material cold, which is always a help. I also was, as I was listening to the feedback, and I was speaking with Jen, who has been sitting next to me until about 3 or 4 minutes ago. We've been chatting about what you've been proposing in here and what you've been explaining to us. And it's interesting how many of us cross 2 or 3 of the categories. We're neither quite fish nor fowl, but somehow or other we manage to muddle through. And I think that when you're dealing with, and again, my bias on this is to try and apply it in relationship experiences where you have 2 people who have come together as adults with a lifetime of experiences behind them and different learning and teaching styles, who don't know how to approach this sort of analysis that would lead you to understand whether master is teaching to slaves learning style, and whether if not, what to do about it. Anyway, I'll stop. Go ahead. Let's see. Michael Anthony, you had your hand up just before, a shade before Master Tandir. So go ahead, Michael Anthony.
Yeah. Again, very interesting because it took me back through a lot of teaching over the years. A couple points. First, Elsa, since you're a 2 and a 3, and I'm a 1 and a 4, maybe sometime we can present together. That'd be pretty interesting.
I would love that.
But, you know, it also makes me want to bring up, because I also was effective as a 2 and a 3 back in the day. So it's just all very, very interesting to see all of that and how it's played out in my life. The other thing that I would say is, if I were to look at this from a master-slave perspective, or a big letter versus little letter, I would say that your big letters are probably going to fall more in the 2, 3, and the slaves are going to fall more, or the little letters are going to fall more in the 1 and 4. Just my perspective.
Interesting. Master Tandir? Master Tandir, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
She was
Okay, good. Thank you so much for this information. I missed some of it, but I'll have to go back over it again. But bits and pieces of it have given me ideas for how to present some of my classes a little differently, and to fine-tune them and interact a little bit more. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other, go ahead, Scott, multi-perf. Multi-perf, you're on.
Sorry about that. Did one, but not the other. I was going to say this has been very useful and helpful for me. Also, I tend to be a 2, and my classes are already a little overstuffed with information, it seems. So trying to get other styles and things to fit in with them and printing it down is going to be a challenge for me. But hopefully everything will be better for it in the end. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Multi-Perf. And Lady Elsa, thank you so much for presenting this evening. And we'll go ahead and shut it down. It's about 10 after 8. So it's just perfect timing. And I gather that others, as well as Jen and I, got a huge amount out of your presentation. Thank you. How will we go about, where do we go to get a copy of the slideshow?
Okay. First of all, can you please advance to the final slide, which I forgot to do?
I can, in fact.
Okay. Here's my bibliography of books you can look at. If you would like a copy of the presentation, either in PowerPoint or PDF format, you can send an email to me, elsa@ladyelsa.com. elsa@ladyelsa.com. And I'll be glad to send you the PDF, the PowerPoint, or either one.
Cool. Thank you very much. We will actually make that available with your permission, along with the recording. The way Ava's site works is there's a classroom, and within the classroom you can go back to the materials that have been presented previously. And so with your permission, we would tag the PowerPoint presentation along with the recording of the session.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much. This is just delightful.
Thank you.
And for everyone in the room, we are dark. We have a live session the second Tuesday in November. And that's going to be Anka from Victoria, British Columbia. And then we're dark on the Thanksgiving and Christmas 4th Tuesdays of November and December. That being said, we'll say good night to everybody. It's been a marvelous session. Thanks again, Lady Elsa.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.